morning, viewers. Welcome to the TSAT program of English. The subject which is being presented is of figures of speech. Figures of speech may sound not so familiar, very somewhat uncommon, because it has not been covered or explored right from the beginning. What we have been taught from our childhood, from our school days, is about it's a twin which is very popular, which is very commonly taught right from schools, is the parts of speech. Parts of speech, as we all are very familiar, are 8 in number. We have been using them: noun, pronoun, adjective, verb, adverb, preposition, conjunction, and interjection. Who is not familiar with them? Even a child is familiar. But how many of us are exposed to figures of speech? Now, before we go to figures of speech, it is better, let's have an understanding of parts of speech. That will be helpful in understanding, getting an overview of figures of speech. The parts of speech, when we say the noun denotes a person, place, things, and pronouns denote the substitutes of the nouns: he, I, we, you, he, she, and it, and they. And when we talk of adjectives, we are dealing with the attributes, the qualities. When we talk of the verbs, we are dealing with the state of the things as well as the activities. The adverbs show us the frequency, the WH questions are answered, where, how, when. All those things are very well answered by adverb. The conjunctions show the link and, but, or, whereas preposition shows the positions, and interjection shows all the surprises which we often express. So in that way, these figures, parts of speech, we are familiar. The speech which we use is comprised of these parts. Their domain is there, their range is there, their specificity is there, and most important, there is an element of certainty. What we say, we mean them. There is one-to-one correspondence. But I am afraid that's not the case when we deal with figures of speech. It is more porous. It is not very certain. It is slippery. You can just slip down, and that the slipperiness is more apparent when more figures of speech are used. Now, instead of mesmerizing you or creating a more mystery of these, let me show it with the help of comparison. Let us start with the parts of speech with which we are familiar and go on to the figures of speech with which we are not so familiar. After all, isn't it said that all knowledge comprises of going from known to unknown? We travel from in the domain of known. What we know and what we don't know. There is a bridge, there is a connectivity between these two. And it will be easier for us to understand. Now, I will give you some examples. With the help of examples, we will see how what we have been saying till now and what can be said, in which way it can be said. We see now, for example, he shouts at me loudly. We know that it's a subject, verb, and object. So he shouts at me loudly. We know the parts of it: subject, verb, and object are used. And when we say it, if you want to say it in a better way, that's a pure, bland way, common way of saying it. There is nothing special. All of us have been using that way. There is nothing great about it. But if we say like this, he roars at me, he roars at me, that use of one word itself, gives it another dimension, another level is made out of it. The reader, the listener begins to imagine how the roar will be. The lion roars, and he begins to imagine about the roar and the similarity. So what was common becomes uncommon. Secondly, we can take more examples, like home is beautiful, good and beautiful. Say the sentence is, the home is good and beautiful. We are using noun, again the adjective and adverbs, which is part of speech, which are the parts of speech. But when we say home is heaven, the one word itself, home is heaven, we can imagine what heaven means. Heaven is something which is full of perfection, it is blissful, and there is no need or want in that. So we find that it's more fulfilling. Heaven is more fulfilling than those two words which are in the common domain. So we have seen how we had said it and how we can say it. There is a possibility of that. So this too, and there is a loose translation of Keats's poem, which he says that if winter, he says that if bad time comes, will not good times come too? We say it in a prosaic way. But in a poetic way, we can say that if winter comes, can spring be far behind? That's what Shelley's poem says. It promises that when bad time comes, bad times will always not last. It will definitely lead to some good times. So there, the season autumn, if autumn comes, winter is season of hardships, difficulties, and problems. And these hardships, difficulties, and problems, scarcities, will definitely go away with the coming of spring season, which is full of bounty, which provides us many things. So that is much richer way. Now, whether you take up the roar of the lion, whether you take up the heaven, or whether you take up the winter and the spring, you find that though words are there, but the range of the words, the sweep of the words is very different, and it inspires us to think in a proper way, to make use of it in a beautiful way. There is a beautiful way of saying, a better way of saying it. So now we see that these things have been taking place. We see that the words which are used, when at the outset, let me tell that what is the aim of this presentation. The pre-learning and the post-learning aspect. The pre-learning is that we are aware with half of the aspect, we are aware with the parts of speech, and we are going to learn about figures of speech of which we are unaware. When after half an hour, when this the presentation is over, you shall be well equipped, or at least you shall be inspired, sufficiently ignited to explore on your own and make comparisons and use these figures of speech. That is the post-learning goal of this program. I wish I will be able to inspire you sufficiently so that you can go on and try on your own. Now, after knowing the difference between these two, parts of speech and figures of speech, let me also tell you that the parts of speech are limited in number. As a child, I learned those same eight parts of speech. I grew up, I saw them constant, they hadn't changed. Now, as a not so young man, I again see them 8, and perhaps they will remain 8 only. They are closed-ended. The number is constant. It's static. Whereas when we come to figures of speech, there are quite many figures of speech. Let me tell you, let me not frighten you, but at the same time let me caution you, there are many figures of speech. English abounds in figures of speech, and that's one of the reasons of its richness. The figures of speech presents makes it richer, and it's one of the richest language in terms of expression. So it is, we find, because as many writers are there, so many expressions will be there. We find it is closed, it's not closed-ended, it is open-ended. They go on making them, they go on using them, and people catch fancy to them, and that's how the use continues. Of course, not all parts of speech which have been made or used by the poets or the users catch the fancy or continue on. They may not have the currency, but some of them really stick on, stay on, linger, continue to be used by more and more people. So they have stood the test of time, and I'm going to talk. I have selected a few parts of speech which are really helpful at undergraduate level, somewhat postgraduate level, and they are generally questioned in the competitive exams. They are put in the competitive exams, and so we find them, they have a lot of relevance, they have the use as well as utility. Before we go to figure of speech, now that we have understood them vis-a-vis parts of speech, how do we define a figure of speech? A figure of speech has been said, it is that which a phrase or a word which heightens the meaning, deepens it, widens it, heighten, deepen, widen, and gives it a range, a wide range, a great sweep to it. So the language is embossed. The language is made richer with the presentation. Now, let me go on to the specifics. When there is Gleaves Whitney, who just talks in a very nice way, he just gives a description. Let me read out the description which is in front of you on the screens. Are all the ways in which human beings bend and stretch the words to heighten meaning or create desired effect. It is by grammarian Gleaves Whitney. The operative words are heighten and stretching of the bending and stretching of the word. Now, the bending and stretching of the word, why do we bend and stretch? Now, the figure which is shown on the TV is also very indicative. We have some people going to the gym, and we can see them bending as well as stretching themselves. Now, what is the purpose of bending and stretching? Why are they doing it? Just not for the sake of nothing. They are just bending it for the sake of attaining flexibility. They attain body flexibility with this movement, bending and stretching. So just as the people who exercise gain flexibility of their body, similarly, when we use them in this way, we can gain a lot of range. We can experience joy, delight in this way, and this will help us to express ourselves in a better way. And more important is that it will leave a good impact on the listeners. They will have a considerably good opinion of us, that we are proficient users, a good user of the language, the people who know us. So with this definition, which has been given by Gleaves Whitney, let me take you through a small journey and give some presentations, the selection of parts of speech, figures of speech. The first one among these is personification. Personification is the first figure of speech of which I want to discuss. The very term itself is indicative. It is a making of a person. Whom do you make a person? The non-living beings, those entities which don't have life in them. And if we are endowing some qualities of human beings, now what are the qualities of human beings? We have emotions, we have feelings. All those emotions and feelings are not invested, are not found in the non-living beings. Now, we take up, we see that the poets generally talk to there is a beautiful comparison, there is a beautiful scene in King Lear, Shakespeare's King Lear, when King Lear, the old king, gets disturbed by the ungratefulness of his 3 daughters. He bursts out in the dead night, in the open storm, and just talks to the storm about his anguish, his agony, how his daughters have left him despite he gave them so much to them. Then we see which has been listed on the screen. The moon seems to be smiling, right? It seems to be parting its lips, and it seems to be smiling. Well, in reality, can the moon ever smile like that? Though it is so beautiful, it's lovelier, softer, but it cannot really. It can inspire laughter, it can inspire a smile, but on its own, it cannot really smile. But when we just put a line like that and make it smile, how very pleasant, how very loving it looks. So as though it is human-like quality it has assumed. That is a personification. Now that's a device of personification at work. Then we take up the alarm. We say the alarm screamed at me this morning. I wish that alarm had life, and I wish really it screams at us. But being non-living, it can't really frown or get angry at us, though we may keep snoozing at it. Still, it continues to wake up without any disturbance or any annoyance on its face. So alarm screamed at me. Now you are giving some quality of emotion to it. You are giving some sort of frown on its face. You are investing in that. So that is one personification of a clock, of the alarm clock. Then we see the flowers. The flowers are lovelier and gentler. They inspire soft feelings, good feelings in us. But by themselves, can they really dance? Do they dance? Or when the wind sways, well, they appear to be dancing, but are they by themselves dancing? I don't think so, because they can't, because they are not human. And only humans can express their happiness with the shake of the leg. So the flowers, when they are made to dance, as they have been dancing on the screen, we find that they are just invested and they are just personified versions. Personification, we find that even John Keats, in his Ode to Autumn, we find that he personifies autumn in a nice way. He gives it a form and a shape. He makes her look like a lady. He says, who hasn't seen you moving carelessly, sitting on the granary floor, and your hair soft lifted with the whiff of wind. So that image is there, which lingers on when we read that poem, Autumn. Even in our common day-to-day use, we find that we personify our country, India, as a lady. We say Bharat Mata. So this is an example, a common example of personification. So with this, we know that the non-living beings, how they become, how they are invested with human qualities, and they begin to assume higher proportions. So this is the first device. Then let us pass on to the next one, which is a simile. Simile is nothing but a comparison. Comparisons, why do we make? Is it necessary? Yeah, it is so necessary. It is very essential that in order to stress a point or to make a point, you have to make a comparison. Without comparison, nothing stands out. So to highlight that comparison, to highlight that uniqueness, we have to compare it with something which is established. Now, Robert Burns is there, a great romantic poet. He has made a very, very striking use of the simile. You can see it on the screen that a beautiful lady she has put a beautiful flower. She is surrounded by flowers. And it was the same picture which Robert Burns had in his mind. He compares the beauty of the rose with that of his beloved. Exactly, he is talking of the freshness of the flowers as well as the freshness of his beloved. So that aspect has been underscored, that has been stressed in this comparison. Mind you, when the comparison is made, all the aspects are not taken into account. That should be borne in mind. Now, when comparison there between lady and the beautiful flower, the flowers, endowment of flowers we find are there. The color is there, the fragrance is there, the symmetry is there. That always is there. But that is not taken into account. What is taken into account is that it is fresh, just as fresh as newly sprung in June. Oh, my love is red, red rose, newly sprung in June. And his beloved is just as fresh as love. So that aspect of freshness has been singled out, and Robert Burns talks about it. He just stresses that point. So other examples we can also say as vibrant as a rainbow. When too many colors are there, how do we say express those? We know that the rainbow is there. It has Vibgyor colors, 7 colors, and those 7 colors, the array of colors, the profusion of colors, if it's there, that aspect of profusion, that aspect of numerousness is covered. So we have, if someone is very light, the lightness, the aspect of lightness is compared with a feather. Feather, as we know, is weightless. It just floats about in the air. So that weightlessness, aspect of weightlessness is taken into account and compared to the human being. The human being's weightlessness is as similar to that of a feather. Feather light, we say. So in this way, we have seen that one point of comparison stands out. The rest can be just glossed over or neglected. That aspect of is just covered in simile, the second part of speech. Then we pass on to the next one, which is metaphor. When we come to metaphor, we are just intensifying our definition. We are just intensifying our search. We see that the definition is very simple, pithy. It says that one becoming the other. Mind you, there two things stood apart. There was a thin line dividing between them. There was a sort of bridge. Overlap was there. But here, do you think there will be an overlap? There won't be any overlap at all. You can just see it. With a small example, with one striking example occurs to me. The father is the ATM of children. I repeat it. The father is the ATM of children. Now, father is there and ATM is there. father is human and ATM is non-human, non-living. But what is compared here, what is taken into account is the instantaneity, instantaneous. The children ask and father gives it. So also we go to the machine and we get we go to ATM and we draw the amount. So that's how the things are in a metaphor. We find some more examples come to my mind. Gandhi of North America. So he's a Charlie Chaplin of our college. He's a Bahubali of our place. So all those Bahubali stands for strength. Whosoever is as having that much strength is can be compared to a Bahubali. And self-effacing qualities with those of Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King, they just get merged with Gandhi. Gandhiism is standing out. And one more screen, just mentioned on the screen, is about Shakespeare's wonderful quotation, "All the world's a stage and we are all actors on it." Now there are two things. Now it's better we understand it in a clearer way. There are two things. The world is there as well as the stage is there. What is happening? The stage is we are on this. We are in this world, and so we are automatically become the actors on it. So there is no division. One becomes the another. Whereas in simile, we find that distinction that you can notice that we use as light as feather. But when we come to metaphors, there is no question of using work as light or as beautiful or as lovely. That word is eliminated. That those two qualities become one itself. And so this is a more advanced stage of simile. Metaphors really enrich the language. They give a depth to it as has been defined. They heighten, they deepen, they widen, and the sweep is more larger for that. So metaphors really do add significantly to our. Next, after knowing these three, let me get on to apostrophe. Well, when we are investing life in non-living beings, like say flowers which were made to dance, the moon which was smiling, and there are examples of Shelley using in West Wind, whose yours mighty presence makes the leaves drive away. The leaves, they just go away, or they are just driven away by your unseen presence, he says in the Ode to West Wind. So do you think that they had gone out of their senses to converse to the wind, to other entities which are not living? Well, at times, then necessity arises. Necessity arises when you will have to talk to them, when there is no listener for you. No, often we don't we find that people talking to their dogs, the pets. Can dog it listens, but can it make sense? Does it understand anything? Or most importantly, does it respond to your queries? But still, how many of us don't? The lonely people find solace in their pets. Why is it due to? Think over. So apostrophe is that device which mostly address to non-living beings. Now, since as children in the nurseries, that nursery rhymes are taught. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. We learned them, and still children are learning it now. Then we didn't understand. Now we have the capacity to understand it. Whom is it addressed? The stars, faraway stars in the galaxy, in the sky, up in the sky. And we wonder what they are. Really, I don't know who you are, what you do, what is your entity, but still you are addressing them. Though you are sure that the replies won't come ever, still you do it. Why? That's one of the hopes or standby or innate nature of man, that he confides. He cannot stay without confiding it to someone, to his confidant, to his companion. It's his nature, we are helpless. Then there is another poet, John Donne, who playfully, in a not so good way, he just calls the sun as with the three adjectives he addresses. He calls it as old, fool, unruly. Now, the sun is old because for ages it has been appearing, and it is fool because it cannot discriminate, and it's unruly because it cannot wield it. Busy, old, unruly sun, he addresses. So he addresses them like that. It's a scorn, it's a hatred, it's a disapproval of the sun. So not only you may approve it, there is another poem of John Donne wherein he says, "Death, be not proud." You should not be proud, though people call you mighty and powerful, mighty and very frightening one. Yet I am not afraid. The poet defies the death. So you see that so many poets, so many users make use of this device apostrophe, addressing it to the non-living beings, and finding solace though not replies. You can see it on the screen. There is a person, a lonely person, and in the background you have the mountain. We have mountains. And we have the say green trees, and perhaps there is some river also flowing. So you see that he is conversing with them. He has some anguish to share with, or some happiness to convey it. So the happiness or the unhappiness or the sadness, gloominess, all of the things can be easily shared with the nature. After all, wasn't Wordsworth taught by nature? He confessed it so many times. So he found solace in nature. So all people who are restful and who have found their life's mission, they find solace in nature. Next, there's these four which we have covered, right from personification, simile, metaphor, as well as apostrophe. They are image devices. The language, you have this video sort of, right? Image devices. Next, next set of devices which I am going to talk of are techniques of writing, the way of writing, the way it should be written, the way it should be conveyed. Euphemisms are there. Euphemism is unpleasantness, should be hidden, it should be camouflaged, and instead of that, it should be presented in a nicer, gentler, softer, acceptable way. After all, aren't we living in a civilized society? And the more gentler we are, the more acceptable we will be. So we know that senior citizens is a very sanitized word. It's a very refined word for old people. If old people may not like it, they will disapprove it. So we say in a better way, it sounds pleasant, I say senior citizens. We have transgenders, right? Transgenders are there, whom the government has termed as third genders. First gender, second gender are common, male and female, but there are transgenders, third genders. That is a euphemism, a soft way of saying it. And for handicapped, we have differently abled people. We said they are abled, but in a different way. So how nice it looks. It looks respectful. And we have expressions like kicked the bucket, passed away. They are gentle ways of saying that they are dead. So you have a technique of writing in which the harshness can be camouflaged, covered, and presented in a nicer way. That is a euphemism. Then next we pass on to irony. The first picture especially conveys everything, where you have a person with a squint eye. The squint shows that actually we are unable to pinpoint where he is seeing and what he is seeing. He seems to be looking at us, but may be ignoring us, and he may be looking sideways, but we are not sure. Irony exactly is that. The user may use it in one way, and it may dart off, it may trajectory, it may just go on in a different direction. After all, don't we use it in our day-to-day use? Don't we use it like that? Say somebody is scoring 0 and you disapprove it, but you outwardly in a fine way you say, good, keep it up, fine. Somebody is not so good looking, not so well neat and tidy, but you say, good, how good you appear. So it's a disapproval. Inwardly you disapprove it, you dislike it, you don't feel comfortable, but still if you say it, it is not proper. It will hurt him, people won't like it, and so you are camouflaging it, covering it. The bigness is shown by smallness. There is a figure, there is an image of a big bulldog, man-sized dog is there, and it is being shown as, it's labeled as tiny. And ironically, we see that right in foreground we have no parking to strictly no parking, and in the very next side of it we find the two big cars assembled there. So irony is a device when we don't have the mood. We just say how I feel so good, and when you say that throughout the weekend you have to work, somebody says how nice, right? And Julius Caesar, Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, there is Antony who disapproves of Brutus, saying that he's an honorable man. But is he an honorable man? It's questionable, because he is the killer of Julius Caesar, and a killer, an assassin, cannot be an honorable man. That's ironic way of saying it. It's a nice way. He is an honorable man. He keeps repeating that. So the irony is one of the techniques of writing. The chiasmus, the sentences get balanced. The very first sentence shows you how it is written. Never let a fool kiss you, or kiss fool you. So that's opposite way of saying it. You forget what to remember and remember what you forget, what you want to forget. So the ways, township went she. Beauty is truth, truth beauty. So it's a construction in which repetition takes place in the reverse way. It's a way of saying it. It's a willing to wound yet afraid to strike. So that's that way we find. That's a Pope's example, willing to wound yet afraid to strike. So chiasmus is a device which has been used by the users, by the proficient users, and it gives a sense of balance. Let me pass on to the next technique, hyperbole. Attention, when you want to be seen or known or noticed, what do? You just you raise yourself up, you raise your hands and stretch yourself. So people meeting after a long time, they just hug each other and say that we are meeting after ages. How can that be when we can't live for ages? And somebody says that she's as old as the hills. How can that be? Really, it can't be. So it's exaggeration to the core. So exaggeration also is needed to catch the attention. Oxymoron is there, something which one word cancel itself. The words cancel themselves. It's a nonce words used for the purpose for that time itself, for that time being, that's it. It doesn't stand. Now when we go into it, you will find that it's not fully functional, it cannot be. vacationing, or when you are vacationing, you cannot work. You are not supposed to work. When you are working, you cannot vacation. So both the words are juxtaposed, and you see the picture, the person lying on the lying there on the seabed, surfing, and at the same time browsing. Instant classics also are opposites, though really they don't work. Next, we pass on to paradox. The statement which appear to be contradictory, yet they are not contradictory. There is a grain of truth in them. You have to ponder over it. Beauty is truth, truth beauty, said Keats. How can that be? How can beauty be truth? They are two distinct entities, but on thinking, much probing, much delving into it, you'll find that perhaps it is true. It cannot be other way. It is true. It's a gospel truth. The child is the father of man. At the face of it, it flies away. It's contradictory. How can child be the father? But it is true when you think. When the child imbibes the qualities of his elders, and he begins to display them, show them when he grows up. So in that way, Wordsworth had said the child is the father of man. So auxiliary is temporary, paradox is permanent, and it stands. It works better than oxymoron. Then next we pass on to pun. The pun are the play on the words, and Shakespeare was very fond of puns. Dr. Johnson, Samuel Johnson, had said that he plays with these words, and all proficient people always play with their words. There is a play on the word liver. Liver is the organ, body organ, and the one who lives also a liver. In a sense, he is a liver. So we find there is a play on the organ as well as the person who lives. So the pun also is a device used for device. Then second last, we come to onomatopoeia. The sound itself is the word. Generally, words have sound, form, and content. The form is different, that content is different. But here, it's one and the same. When the cat cries, cat call is meow. When you hit bang, when the bees buzz, when you have when you want to make somebody silent, you say shh on your lips, like finger on your lips. So there's a beautiful way of onomatopoeia is chug chug, puff puff, ding dong, military. So onomatopoeia is a sound device. Then lastly, we come to alliteration. Alliterative devices are there. We see, say, for example, butter makes a batter better. And there's Ronald Reagan, Coca-Cola, Marilyn Monroe, beautiful bell. So beaded bubbles winking to the brim, said by Keats. So in that way, we find all bees making a particular way. Alliterative device, the sound device made by us, made by use for the use. The last two mentioned are those sound. Onomatopoeia is a sound device, and alliteration also is a sound device. The first four are the images, and the rest in between we find writing techniques. So all 13 I've listed out, and they really stand out. I wish that the viewers take a cue from it, and they have been exposed to a new. It's a little known concept, and they are sufficiently inspired, and sufficient ignition is there, and they can make exploration on its own, on their own, and really come out with good interpretations. So thank you very much for being with me, and we have explored the genre of figures of speech. Thank you very much. I am available. If any doubts are there, you can always get them clarified. My number is always mentioned. It's mentioned on the screen, so you can just have a look at it. And if any questions are there, you can also raise them. Thank you once again. I thank the CCE for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much, one and all.